Welcome back, Mando.
Oh, greetings, Bucketheads. Mavar Tagar. Welcome to our 318th Shredding the Rad, Shroud of Darkness episode of Mandovision. I am your host, Nargai Tom, and thank you so much for checking out our small independent Star Wars podcast. So glad you're here. Hey, we're on socials. Find us, Mando_Vision, Twitter /X and Instagram, Mandovision at Blue Sky, and you can email this fine podcast at mandovisiontom@gmail.com. Make sure you're liking, subscribing, following, and sharing the show with all the Mandalorians in your covert. All right, Bucketheads, we are back. We have another installment of Star Wars Rebels Rewatch, and it's a good episode. It's really exciting to get into this one. We're back into the mythology. We're back into Jedi stuff, and I know that's what the bulk of the Star Wars fans really want to get into, really want to talk about, and that's what we're here to get into today. A Shroud of Darkness is it's almost a turning point episode in a lot of ways. Because we're rocketing towards the finale of season 2, so things are about to pick up on its intensity, and also because now we're kind of forcing some characters to confront truths, and it's a great episode. They use a lot of great Jedi Force mysticism, and the Temple on Lothal comes back into play. So it's really strong stuff. I'm very excited about this episode. I can't wait to kind of talk to you guys about it, get into it. It is like the plot description for this episode kind of clunky. I'm not gonna lie, because it sends a very, what I think is a mixed message, a confusing message in many senses. But we'll talk about that momentarily. But I think we should just go ahead and get into our particulars for the episode, so we can just dive on in. So what do you guys think? Let's go ahead and do it. This is Star Wars Rebels, Season 2, Episode 18, Shroud of Darkness. Original air date March 2nd, 2016. Written by Henry Gilroy. Directed by Sal Ruiz. Our primary cast for this week: Taylor Gray is Ezra Bridger. Vanessa Marshall is Harrison Dula. Freddie Prinze Jr. is Kanan Jarrus. Tia Sakar, Sabine Wren. Steve Blum is Zeb Orielos. Dave Filoni's back as Chopper. Ashley Eckstein is Ahsoka Tano. Matt Lanter is back as Anakin Skywalker. James Earl Jones, Darth Vader, as if he would be anybody else. Philip Anthony Rodriguez is the fifth brother. Jason Isaacs, he's back too as the Sentinel. More on that later. Sarah Michelle Gellar is seventh sister. And Frank Oz returns as the voice of Yoda. The plot for this episode, let's go ahead and talk about it. Kanan, Ezra, and Ahsoka return to the Lothal Jedi Temple to find out how the Inquisitors have continually been able to track the rebels. Not really what this episode is about. The Inquisitors obviously are a concern, and they're trying to go back. It feels like they're trying to go back to the temple to find out how best to deal with the Inquisitors, how to fight the Inquisitors. Not necessarily, like, the implication is that they're being tracked somehow, right? Like, that's what that plot description sounds like. And, you know, while we know that Seventh Sister had one of her little mini droids messing around with Chopper, they never come out and say that they're being tracked via something in Chopper. It just sounds like, through what we know of the Force, that Ezra and Kanan, as they grow stronger, are sort of like these burning beacons in the Force. And so Seventh Sister and Fifth Brother and the other Inquisitors are able to find them more easily, is sort of what it sounds like, is really what's going on. So that plot description is a little confusing. Because, again, I do think it has more to do with our heroes just trying to figure out the next step, right? Because they want to protect Phoenix Squadron, they want to protect the people of the Ghost, their friends, their family. So they're trying to get more head on with this approach into how do we deal with the Inquisitors. And that's what I think that plot is all about. But if you disagree, by all means, let's have a chat. Otherwise, everything in this episode is pretty fun. There are some interesting visuals in the episode. We have a new model of Anakin Skywalker seen via the via hologram. This hologram instruction videos. That's early in the episode, and then they use that same model for the Force vision that Ahsoka experiences while in the temple on Lothal. One of the things I read about that, why Anakin looks different, it said something about like how his recreating the more widely accepted visual of him as the flowing tunic and all this stuff was going to cost too much money, so they redid it more simplistically to save money. Which I don't know how that makes sense. I'm not a TV budgetary person, but I mean, you have the model of Anakin from the Clone Wars. I don't know why why money would have been a thing. But hey, so Anakin looks a little bit different in this. And he's wearing a very different costume, like some kind of armor with like the Jedi Order symbol emblazoned upon it. It's definitely different. It's not my favorite look for Anakin, but it is what it is. And also, getting a new look in this episode is Master Yoda. Very different visually, and I think that can be explained away a couple different ways because Ezra has never seen Yoda. He only has sort of a visual in his mind of what Yoda looks like based on the description that Kanan gave him. So in his mind, when he sees Yoda, he pictures what Kanan described him as. Now that we know Dave Filoni did on purpose. He based that version of Yoda, this Force Vision version of Yoda, on the old Kenner toy from 1980. So they're paying a bit of an homage to that. There's even rumors that Filoni wanted to kind of include the snake around his neck that came with the toy back in the day, which I did have. So kind of a fun nod to the old Kenner collection from the 80s. But yeah, that's why Yoda looks different, because Ezra has never really met Master Yoda and only knows the description that Kanan gave him. So this is what Yoda looks like in his mind. Other than that, I think it's time we can go ahead and get into the episode. So let's go ahead and do that, my friends. You know what that means. It is time. Strap on your buckets. Let's go.
Get out of here. We'll hold them off. You're going to have to relocate the covert. This is the way. This is the way.
So our episode opens on the obsidian-covered world of Osalan, and there's a lightning storm happening, and we find Kanan and Ezra very quickly in a lightsaber battle against the Inquisitor's fifth brother, seventh sister, returning yet again. And it's a very cool lightsaber battle. There's a lot of fun stuff in there, a lot of good banter between Kanan and Ezra, as well as really good display of their growing chemistry and teamwork with one another as they are able to really engage in, again, the evolution of how they have been able to combat the Inquisitors at this point. This is definitely the highlight of it thus far. They are much more able to withstand the dark side, the moves and the power that the Inquisitors have. Again, they're more synced up, they're more trained, they're more prepared for this battle. We find out that they were on Usalan because they're still looking for a rebel base. They're trying to find a place for Phoenix Squadron to be able to hold up and to make moves against the Empire instead of just constantly being on the run. Well, the Inquisitor's arrival is something that Kanan is going to find very, very troubling. And they have to be able to get out of this situation. Again, they're kind of on the ropes. It is sort of a very even match, but you can definitely tell that Ezra and Kanan are on the more defensive aspect of it, especially since they are backed up to the edge of a cliff. And at one point, Ezra gets knocked over the cliff. I believe his fifth brother is able to get him over the edge, and Kanan has to reach back, grab him with his arm to keep him from plummeting to his doom. But while down there, Ezra is able to reach out with the Force, and he's going to make contact with one of the TBDs. TBDs? Basically like a flying manta ray that inhabits the world and is down there in the crevasse at the very, very bottom. So Ezra is able to signal one of them. They make a big running jump, and they fly away to safety, leaving the Inquisitors standing there looking foolish. And then Chopper pursues in the Phantom. Chopper, who was on the planet as well, but decided to take a strategic retreat when the Inquisitors arrived. An interesting move on Chopper's part, but he shows up when needed. Kanan and Ezra get aboard the Phantom, and they rocket to safety. And they're going to go and meet up with Ezra, but they're going to go meet up with Hera. And the instructions are they want to meet in deep space away from the rest of Phoenix Squadron. Again, Kanan has become very, very concerned about how easily the Inquisitors seem to be finding them recently. And this is, again, like we talked about in the beginning, sort of the confusion of what the plot of this episode actually is. I still maintain that it has more to do with the fact that Kanan and Ezra are standing out in the Force a little bit more easily now that they've been training and they're engaging in combat. They have good chemistry, they have a good master-apprentice relationship. So they sort of stand out in the Force now, and I think that's really what makes them easier to find. Again, I tried to confirm if this had anything to do with Chopper being messed with and having a tracking device. Couldn't really seem to find much confirmation on that route. But it's concerning to Kanan, so he wants to meet with Ahsoka. Ezra gets to Kanan's quarters first and has a conversation with Ahsoka, who's watching a hologram of her former master. He's teaching different tactics for lightsaber combat. It's like a modified version of Form 4 that has more to do with battling battle droids and things like that. There's a part where Ezra says that Kanan mentioned that Anakin was the greatest warrior the Jedi Order had during the Clone Wars, and that Ezra himself had been studying those teachings on their recordings so he could become a better lightsaber duelist? Saberist? I don't know. One of those. And it's up to Ahsoka. Ahsoka tells that Anakin was like the best friend anyone could ever ask for, right? Like, again, we're really playing up Anakin here as a person, which is only really just foreshadowing bad things to come, right? And they sort of end the conversation with Ahsoka saying how she doesn't really know what happened to Anakin. The last time she saw him, he was rushing off to save the Chancellor, which is the beginning of Revenge of the Sith. But she's had her suspicions, as the season has gone on, as she has begun to investigate more of who this mysterious Sith Lord is. I think she has had her suspicions, and it will be time to confront those very suspicions in this episode. So Kanan enters the cabin, and he talks about his fear of the Inquisitors and how they're going to continue to be a threat. And now that Ezra and Kanan are more aligned with the growing rebellion, that their presence with them is a danger. Much like how Luke felt going to Endor, right? Like, Vader could sense him, knew he was there, knew it was a rebel thing. And Ahsoka mentions how, like, in times like this, they would often turn to Obi-Wan Kenobi or Yoda for sage, wise advice. And this is when Kanan gets the idea of going back to Lothal, returning to the Jedi Temple, and try to commune with Master Yoda from there, because Kanan had a chat with Yoda last time they were there. And so they will go off by themselves, leaving the rest of the Spectres alone. So they take they take the Phantom, and they head to Lothal. But out of an abundance of caution, they do not tell the rest of the team where they are going. And one of the funnier bits in this episode is Hera telling Sabine that she's learned that sometimes it's better not to ask these questions. So now we get back to Lothal, and we approach the temple, and it's another moment that I want to talk about a little bit about, because Ezra invites Ahsoka to help them use the Force to open the temple. They know how to do this from the first time they were at the temple, so they know they have to use the Force to sort of have the mountain sort of spin and reveal the entrance. And Ahsoka politely declines, because she is no longer a Jedi, and only a Jedi should be using the Force to access the temple. Now, I'm curious if this is just a matter of semantics, because later in the episode we see the Inquisitors do the same thing, use the Force to reopen the temple so that they can gain access to it. Now, I'm again, did Ahsoka say this out of respect and reverence for the Jedi Order, and that was the reason why, or did she honestly believe that a non-Jedi couldn't open it? Is the Force that strict? Is the Force that attuned to like what affiliation you have? Now, I ask this because when the Inquisitors open the temple, they are using the Force to do so. But everything lights up red around them. And so I wonder if they are using the Force to sort of force the opening of the temple, sort of against the temple's own wishes. That's never really explained or elaborated upon, but I do think it's an interesting point of discussion. So what do you think on that? Did it really matter that Ahsoka isn't quote-unquote a Jedi? Or doesn't matter, and the Darksiders were kind of warping and perverting the Force to, again, force open the temple. Very curious about all that. So we'll have to consider our options on that. So they enter the temple. Chopper stays outside with the ghost, and he's sort of like the lookout, right? Now, we know, again, I already spoiled it. The Inquisitors are coming. We know that part. But before they get there, this gives us the opportunity. We know they're coming. It's going to happen in the middle of the episode. So let's talk about the 3 Force visions that we get. Let's start with... I think we'll start with Ezra's first, because Ezra is having the conversation with Yoda, and it's a very philosophical conversation. It's a very certain point of view conversation, right? Like this is Yoda talking about his fears and his worries, and addressing the fact that the Jedi made a terrible mistake by signing up and getting involved in the Clone Wars themselves. He addresses sort of the hubris of it all, and his own level of fear that came about from his conflict with the idea of the Jedi being generals in this army, and how he's able to look back on it now. It's a very philosophical conversation. It has a lot to do with, right and wrong, and should and shouldn't I. Like we're supposed to fight the Empire, right? Like we're supposed to defend our friends and family, right? And it's a very interesting back and forth that they have. But the main takeaway from their conversation is that just because you become a Jedi, just because you have the ability to access the Force, doesn't mean that you're no longer afraid. And Yoda explains that it's a lifelong challenge to avoid bending into fear, giving into anger, and following the path of the dark side. And for Ezra, that's when everything in the temple begins to shake and his vision begins to end, begins to fade. So now we'll cut to the first character who got the vision, which is Kanan. And Kanan's is of a very different sort, right? His is very aggressive. He enters into a dojo. His vision is of a sentinel, the Jedi, the temple guards that we had seen in Star Wars: The Clone Wars. And it's a really great fight, but it has to do with Kanan's fear, right? What Kanan is trying to do, like the idea that the Sentinel Guard claims that it's time for Ezra to die because he's going to fall to the dark side. It's very evocative. It triggers something in Kanan that he needs to expunge, right? It's an interesting fight too, because the way the Sentinel sort of goads Kanan, right? Mentions how Kanan, the guard the Sentinel is surprised by Kanan's lack of knowledge on lightsaber combat, and at one point, Kanan has to grab a second lightsaber from the wall, and it's a red blade, which is a little bit alarming, right? But now 2 new Sentinels emerge, right? And they say that Kanan will never be strong enough to protect Ezra from the dark side, and that he is going to fail, and that Kanan will be punished for this failure, and must go. But not so fast, because once Kanan accepts the idea that Ezra will make his own decisions, and that Kanan has given him all the knowledge and information to resist the dark side that he can, what happens next? Kanan gets knighted. Kanan gets knighted by the Sentinel, who then removes his helmet, revealing the face of the Grand Inquisitor. So thus confirming everything that we had suspected, that we've known for 10 years, that the Grand Inquisitor was previously one of the Temple Guard, one of the Sentinels of the Jedi Order. And Dave Filoni has come out and said that he was, in fact, one of the Temple Guards who arrested Ahsoka back in Season 6. So we get a little bit of an origin story for our Grand Inquisitor who perished at the end of Season 1. We also get the return of Jason Isaac, which is always very, very cool as well. Now that's when the temple begins to break, and the Sentinel says that he will aid their escape. And we don't know what that means just yet, but we'll get there. The third vision we need to talk about is, of course, Ahsoka's, which is her meditating and having forced visions of Anakin, and Anakin accusing her of not being there for him when he needed her. And it's kind of gutting in many, many senses. She tells him that she made a choice, and he is not cool about it. This is Anakin full of anger, right? Saying that he was abandoned and that she had failed him and trying to like lay the guilt trip on, right? And then it shifts. And we find, Anakin, one of the last things he says is like, you know what I've become. And then he morphs into Darth Vader. And when she turns around, of course, no one is there. But this is sort of like the beginning of the confirmation of her suspicions. That Anakin did, in fact, survive Order 66. And that Anakin has become the Sith Lord that everyone was worried about. That everyone is now on the fear of. That has been hunting and killing Jedi since the end of the Clone Wars. So the vision snaps out of that. The Inquisitors have entered the temple, and the Inquisitors, the Sentinels, pour out to distract the Inquisitors and allow our Jedi to make their escape, but not before Ahsoka turns around and sees Master Yoda on the bench, on some kind of piece of ruin. And gives her a little wave. What I thought was interesting about this was they kept the vision that Ezra had of Anakin, of Yoda. Obviously Ahsoka has seen Yoda before, knows what Yoda looks like, but they sort of kept that 1980 Kenner's version of Yoda. It probably was just simpler. It probably was a more another money move, but that's what they did. And so she catches a glimpse of Yoda, and I think it kind of gives her a little bit of hope, right? And it's just a nice little moment for those two characters who, as far as we know, do not reunite at any point in the reals, right? In the real world. So our heroes make their escape, but the Sentinels, again, they're sort of like Force ghosts. They can't really do much. We just see them collapse onto the Inquisitors into a ball of light, but that's not going to end them or kill them. So what we have to realize is now that the Jedi Temple has fallen to the Empire, they have called in Lord Vader, who has arrived. And while the Inquisitors seem to think that the Jedi are getting more powerful, Vader says this will be their demise. This will lead to their demise. This will be their Jedi's undoing. Meanwhile, Ezra is going to relay a piece of information that he got from Yoda that is very, very important, which is when Ezra tells him that Yoda said to go find Malachor. Ezra believes Malachor is a person. It is, in fact, Ahsoka who corrects him and reveals that Malachor is a place. And Malachor is where we'll be rocketing to very, very soon. Of course, you remember Malachor 5 if you were a Knights of the Old Republic Part 2 fan. Malachor 5 is where the final battle takes place, and that planet is destroyed at the end of the game. But yeah, we're getting a rocket to Malachor. So that's the end of the episode, friends. And it's 9 juicy buckets of awesomeness. Good episode. The knighting of Kanan, it hit me harder than I expected. I'll be honest with you. The fact that the temple, the Force, and the temple sort of confer this rank on him post his master's demise, post the council's demise. It's very, very fascinating to me. It was very, very interesting and very, very rewarding moment, I think, for Kanan Jarrus. So I love that aspect of it. I loved Ezra getting to have a conversation with Yoda, and Yoda talking about all the things that we've talked about during the Clone Wars, about how they fell into the trap. The Jedi fell into the trap of the dark side, how they fell into the trap of the Sith, how they allowed anger and hatred and fear to blind them, and that led to their downfall. Much like Vader thinks that this new power that they are feeling is going to lead to their downfall. It's a sticky wicket. It's sticky wickets everywhere. And of course, the Ahsoka vision beginning to sort of confirm her suspicions, her worst suspicions that Anakin is in fact the Dark Lord of the Sith. But that powerful revelation, that powerful confirmation of her suspicions is yet to come, and it is still one of my favorite moments of the series. So that being said, Bucketheads, we are going to close shop, get the heck out of here. You will be back next week for another exciting installment of our Star Wars Rebels rewatch. I can't wait to get into that with you guys. We are rocketing towards the conclusion of Season 2, and it's going to be a blast. All right, my friends, go out there, be great Star Wars fans. Continue to be kind, supportive, inclusive. even if we don't agree with them, man, we're having that civil discourse. We're having a fun conversation, and we're getting into it. You know, I have convinced several people to give Andor a go, and they have gotten into it. They have embraced it. They have come aboard. You know, and that's all we can ask for, right? For them to give it a try, and they either get into it or they don't. And if they don't, it's okay. Again, Star Wars is Baskin Robbins. It's all the different flavors, and there's a flavor for every single person. So, again, have those fun conversations. Let's get into some discourse, fun civil discourse, and we'll be back next week for another exciting installment of MandoVision. Reach out to me on the socials at Mando_Vision, Twitter and Instagram, MandoVision at Blue Sky. Email the show, mandovisiontom@gmail.com. Make sure you're liking, subscribing, following, and sharing the show with all the Mandalorians in your covert. And we'll be back next week. But until then, remember, this podcast, it can only end one way, my friends. This is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way. This is the way.
You expect me to search the galaxy for the home of this creature and deliver it to a race of enemy sorcerers?
This is the way.